It's not biased. As long as you're able to describe what the criteria is, then it's going to evaluate the same person the same way versus saying that, hey, JC is going to evaluate Mary one way and then Ardis a different way.
Welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where we demystify artificial intelligence in the world of higher education. I am your host, 102, JC Bonilla. Number 2, the awesome Ardis Kadiu. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, JC, how's it going?
Very good, very good. Spring's in the air. Tons of rain here in New York. What's happening in your neck of the woods, my friend?
It's been raining here as well. We're okay right now. It's nice and sunny, so it's all good. It's all good. Spring is in the air.
Spring is in the air. You know what also happens with spring in many of our partner schools?
They get applications.
And sometimes a shitload of them, which means that we go back to this very fascinating part of our lives. Ardis and I spent a little too long in higher education, and we know the emotional stage right now of many of our friends and peers and partners, right? That if they are administering a holistic admission process, specifically via deadline, they're all racing towards that May 1st deposit day, right? And then if you backtrack, hundreds, thousands of applications needs to be yay, nay. And it's a really important process, culture, ceremony, if you will, that higher education goes through. So today we want to give the space to unpack what that process looks like, obviously through the lens of AI. So NYU received a record-breaking number of applications this year. 120,000 applications, which is basically the largest any private school in the country received. Think about that 25,000 of them came for early decisions. So that means that they already went through this process that we had to go through, because some of these applications have rounds. And as you applied to a round, you may get that yay, nay accordingly. Other schools like University of Texas at Austin, they received a 24 increase in applications for this coming fall. University of Washington in its 5-year cumulative growth at almost 57%. Or universities like Harvard with, super selective admissions, more than 60,000 applications for 2,000 spots. So Ardis, a gigantic amount of volume, and it's humanly powered, right? So on the review part, think about the following, right? The average public university has 160 new students per staff member. For every counselor or reader, there's 160 new students that are going to go through this process, right? Which actually translates to an application to staff ratio of about 600 to 650 for a selective school. So for a staff member to welcome 150, 160 new applications, maybe they had to review on average about 650. That's an incredible amount of work. Now, look at this stat. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to review an application. And Ardis, as you know, is not a one read. Multiple reads. Increasing workload. And the part that it blows my mind, and you and I saw this firsthand, after COVID and the pandemic, a lot of these administrators, counselors, readers have been also given multiple, parts of the pie. And we've seen that basically these administrators now have even more workload, literally creating probably one of the worst case scenario for workload, compensation, and really satisfaction for this. And at the end of the day, it is Bobby, Mary, and Tommy, the student, who is receiving a yay, nay. What we know is that behind the scenes, that curtain that you just revealed, it's not a fun one, and it's a lot of work. Oof, how are you feeling about that? You a little overwhelmed?
Yeah, for sure. What jumps out of me is the 15 to 30 minutes per application, which is incredible, right? Because if you think about it, like if you interview somebody, like how can you make a decision in 15 to 30 minutes? So it's just reading that information. It's like So anyways, that kind of jumped off at me. And the 600 plus for selective schools, it's just a lot.
To bring the plane in today's conversation, what we want to do is talk about support, not replacement, right, of human decision makers in the admission process. We know that this is a problem and it's a critical issue, right? Because we need to handle an incredible application screening process, whether it's through deadline management, rolling admissions, and our admissions officers are super, super, super busy. And this nuance of evaluation, whether holistic or based on speed, it's non-trivial, right? At the end of the day, we believe that faster responses and quality responses is the optimizer. And what we know we have seen throughout the past 5 years, the trend of volume up, 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 and up. And what is not growing at that rate is humans, the people, and the time that we have. At the end of the day, admissions quality, it's suffering because this mismatch between volume and applications and the resources that we have.
I mean, one more question that I had for you as we're going through this, but we also need to look at this from the student's experience perspective, right? That student is waiting a lot longer to get responses. It might not be as important for highly selective schools because they have certain deadlines when they're putting this out, but for schools that are open enrollment, reviewing that application is super important. Going from 45 days to 24 hours or even 2 hours, it just unlocks so many of those opportunities, not just for that student, but also the school is able to actually increase their enrollment because, as we know, what we call about speed to lead and how fast, few schools that get into that student's inbox or they give that aid package or they admit them first. That's a strategy. Early decisioning is a strategy, and getting that decision a lot faster is really, really important. So I don't want us to lose track of that because yes, we can look at this from the perspective of those highly selective schools, but everybody else is like, well, it's like that's a really nice problem that NYU has, right?
100%. So not only this is a staff burnout kind of institutional risk, but from the receiving end, the student is an experience component. And artists may also say that the toll that it brings on families and individuals is high, right? So plans, futures ride on the yay, and emotional despair rides on the nay, right? So, but the question, artists, is not whether AI belongs in admissions. I really, really believe this, right? Is how this solution can come in and really support us because higher education depends on it. And getting it right, it's where it's at. Does that make sense? I think that's a really important point because I know many of our partners are going to be like, what? Artists and JCs are bringing AI to admissions? Like, what? So that's it. That's the cardinal sin.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah, we have a very intelligent and very forward-thinking audience here. So everybody's bought in that AI belongs in admissions.
All right. So let's start unpacking how college admissions work. We spoke about holistic and rolling, and everybody, there's these components that make the admissions process. On holistics admissions, we think about academic achievement, GPAs, SATs, scores will come in. We know personal statements, extracurricular activities, recommendation letters, a lot of information on socioeconomic status, first generation status. All those things are important. And the viewpoint of holistic is that they need to be balanced because you want to make a decision that would bring the right class with the right potential, fosters and balances attributes that the school believes, sometimes diversity, socioeconomical aspect, right sizing of the class. I need this many engineers, this many social science, and so on and so forth. That's at its very, very core what holistic admissions looks like. Artists, you want to do really quick how rolling admissions looks like?
Yeah. So rolling admission, I mean, you have rolling admissions in private institutions as well, but also public institutions like community colleges, and also some state schools, depending on what the program. But I'm going to focus on community colleges specifically because they're open admissions, right? Meaning that they don't usually deny anybody unless they have, unless they don't meet certain criteria, like have a high school transcript or they're not residents and things like that, right? So depending depending on those very, very few criteria that they require. And usually you register today or you apply today and they admit you, and then now you can be in classes tomorrow. So it's very, very fast, right? So that speed there is very important. So a little bit different from holistic admissions where you're looking at everything, whereas for open institutions, it's a matter of like, are you a resident? Are you able to kind of verify your prior academic credentials or history, like high school diploma and so on and so forth?
So as we review how these two modalities, there's a big manual process embedded in both modalities. One basically brings the attention towards, is every read consistent, and are you doing consistency holistic? And or as you go through kind of rolling admissions, are you able to process as fast as you can so you can then bring that student into the process that you need, right? Ultimately, it's the context is important, right? And what we know is scaling these two aspects, whether it's subjectivity, objectivity, and speed. It's one of the things that we know is in front of us. So here comes the angle of AI artists, right? There's a really important AI advantage that it brings the consistency and the fairness in the evaluation because it's uniform, it's standardized across an entire application. Let's stop there for a little bit, right, artists? Consistency and fairness and uniform. Why can't I say that about AI? Like, where does your head go to when I say consistency and fairness?
Yeah, look, so humans are very biased, right? And when you think about AI versus a human and how biased an AI is versus a human, like we're the definition, the walking definition of bias, right? So we're biased based on our where we grew up, based on our language, based on the skin of our color, based on a lot of different things. So when you're telling a human, hey, you got to evaluate somebody with this criteria to come in here, there's always going to be spilling that out. Like I interview somebody and I have a bias because they were well spoken but meanwhile I'm hiring them for a data entry job, and then somebody else who's really, really good at that, like they didn't come off really well in the interview, so I didn't hire that person. So this idea that we need to match a person to a job or to a standard is really important. And as humans, we're terrible at that. That's why we have 3, 4, 5 rounds of interviews for somebody. We have tests, we have criteria, and that's the same thing that kind of follows in here. Is that AI? If you're giving it a standard, it's really, really good at giving you the same outcome, a very replicable outcome based on that particular standard and criteria that you provided. So it's not biased. As long as you're able to describe what the criteria is in very detail, then it's going to evaluate the same person the same way versus saying that, hey, JC is going to evaluate Mary one way and then Ardis a different way. So that's kind of what we mean by AI is consistent and fair. It doesn't mean that the standards are fair. It just means that it's going to be consistent over and over and over again, which leads to fairness if you have baked that into your criteria.
I think 10 years ago, last time I did this, administering admissibility for a highly selective and niche program, at COSP. Ardis, you and I worked there. And I remember doing what is called a calibration meeting. So we only admitted 2 people, each of us, and we all basically go through the case. There's 7 people in the admissions committee, and would all of us reach the same conclusion, right? And it was just fascinating, right? Because as much as we tried to be unhuman and achieve a standardized criterion so that artists would have been admitted by JC and by Peter and John and whatnot, as opposed to I admitted you and rejected you and those type of things. Those calibration meetings were really, really interesting, inefficient, by the way. And then what happened, artists, is that the calibration started working 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. By the 4th day, second week, that fatigue came in, and the speed to just get, oh my gosh, I haven't done my 55 reviews that I need to do, and they need to have decisions tomorrow. So you go through a whole different shortcut. And then the good intentions, I guess that's my point. The good intentions that we had to remove all these subjectivity just kind of go down the drain because the pragmatism of I need to get this done was always creeping up. Now, speaking of pragmatism, the second advantage It's just the efficiency gains that, very simple, we have in document processing and evaluation speed. OCR and NLP, we're going to have a whole section on that. We just need to know that AI is the best, right, at looking at documents, digitizing them, ones and zeros, and basically running workflow on them. The best in terms of speed, right? Artists, and I'd love for you, riff a bit on what I call the most interesting nuanced aspect of AI. That deeper, it can run qualitative aspects through advanced, techniques like NLP that allows you to basically read an essay or things at scale through sentiment, through thematic lenses, and connect the dots and patterns that we humans sometimes don't even can connect, because I can do it in 1 and 2, but when I'm doing 1,000, I lost the trend. So the deeper aspect and the qualitative at scale that AI provides. Can you give us some examples and maybe what is happening today in AI for admissions? So where are you at with this?
Yeah, so I want to kind of talk about the AI specifically around these two workflows, right? One of them is document processing or OCR. We call it OCR or data extraction, so to speak. And large language models have been really good about kind of processing data, but also the OCR part wasn't available until some of the multimodal models came around. And maybe this is a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. And today we actually have some very capable models that were just released. One of them was the Gemini 2.0 models that essentially do OCR really well, right? Before, you had specialized services or specialized companies that build their own models on OCR to extract data. Well, today, these large language models, like at least the frontier ones, are able to extract that data in a very accurate way and provide it to you in a structured way. So then when you look at kind of data extraction, you can run workflow on that. Large language models, multimodal, really great at that. The second one that you mentioned, like the ability for kind of the evaluation of essays and documents like that, and how well they can reason, now factors into this component as well, right? So the deeper insights is a little bit more possible today because we now have reasoning models that can say, okay, I'm going to evaluate this one on this criteria, or I'm going to look at it as part of this, and then I'm going to provide scoring capabilities or reason through why that's the same way it is. And when we go into kind of where we are today, unfortunately, AI admissions in the market and what's available today, we have not come in, and there is no product yet that does this really well, or puts all these pieces together with the latest technology. Because the technology is just available today around like I said, the OCR, large language model, reasoning models. So where we are in terms of the technology is that in the past, we've had OCR technology that scans transcripts, and it's a whole separate product that essentially does that. And you had to plug that into your admissions process, so you had to pack into your SIS. So you're bringing transcripts into Banner or whatever, you're scanning them, but still a person has to review them. Another way that some schools are using this is, as they're loading data into their CRM, they're able to kind of extract some of that information by writing a prompt and provide some summarizations on that text or that document that's happening there. So that's as far as I believe we are today with AI in admissions, is both on just looking at data and data extraction from documents. We have not moved into the next phase, which is the reasoning or the human aspect of it, or the evaluation part of it. Maybe some essays. I've seen just a couple of use cases where folks are using that with essays, but I haven't seen really any solutions that's baked into kind of the workflows that the schools are using, but they're probably special build pieces around that.
So artists, the underlying techniques in language models and AI is this idea of information retrieval. And very quick, a little old school vibes. This is OCR, you're able to read any document. Natural language processing, which in a way fuels all these LLMs, is this idea that a technique can extract text and add layers of semantic analysis, understand entities, and does all that. But on top of that, there's this idea of semantic search, that it creates interconnectivity between databases that are quantitative, structured, unstructured, and multiple things. Why? Because it allows us to do these technical applications on admissions that are really, really important. Automated document verification, recommendation based on written samples, course equivalency and mapping, predictive modeling, and many, many, many more. So let's just take one at a time and let's explain to everybody how AI today, for example, can do document verification. You want to go on this one, Ardis?
Yeah, so document verification is all about how do you automate, for example, look at a state ID or multiple documents that the student has uploaded in order to do, let's say, residency verification. So that's an interesting one where the LLM or the large language model is actually looking at that document and verifying that this student is, a resident of the state or not.
Or did I did the form the right way? So think about completeness. Do I have is the form, the document ready for processing, right? And a lot of the verification is not only the document is good, it's just within the document completed. Now, recommendation on written samples. Obviously, this is where you can read an essay and you can start extracting themes about readiness for innovation, right? Your ability to be a global citizen. Whatever themes the school goes for, I think that's a really interesting use case where you can have essays or written samples evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, that's a summarization problem right there. Like the large language models have been used now for summarization since the beginning. You provided a large email and say, summarize this into one bullet point or two bullet points. Here's a PDF document, give me a summary. Here's a paper, give me a summary of that paper. The same thing goes here. Here's an essay, just summarize this for me and tell me if the student touched on this point, right? So that's a summarization problem around AI right now.
Yes. Ardis, you gotta talk more about this one because I know you're passionate about it. You bring it up in constant product meetings, but one of the things that AI can do magically is course equivalency or curriculum mapping, which I know it's a big point for many of us. Say more about what's in your head when you bring that up as AI solving these important problems on schools.
Yeah, so a lot of work is put towards transcript evaluations, and that goes towards a transfer credit. When a student comes into your institution, you want to look at their transcripts and you want to evaluate and say, okay, if I'm going to give you credit for certain courses that you did somewhere else, or maybe in high school for AP classes and so on and so forth, I need to understand what is the equivalency of this course to a course database that we already have. So you took, math gymnastics, and it was called math gymnastics, but it was actually algebra 1, right? And then we have it coded as algebra 1 on our side. Now, to a human, that they don't know if those are the same things, right? But, if you look at the description of what their course is, or maybe underneath, the AI can actually put those two pieces together and say, oh, no, they're actually equivalent because here's some of the things that are covered in each one of them. So this is a process, course equivalency or transcript evaluation or curriculum mapping, so to speak. It's something that schools hire faculty members to do. Like they give them a transcript and then they say, okay, can you please map these courses to our curriculum, or here is a course or a syllabus that a student took a course in. Can you see if this is the equivalent? Does it meet the academic standards, or does it meet the outcomes for them, a syllabus from one of our courses? Super important in order to bridge and map credits from one institution to another institution for transfer, for first-year students coming from college. And also, it's very, very important for kind of placement as well in institutions. So if you're coming in and you took certain levels of math, they need to understand that they're going to put you in a math level that is, kind of matches your credits or the math that you did before, and they're putting you in for success. So super important. It's probably one of the most important things and one of the highest value right now that institutions see from a AI perspective is transcript evaluation, course, curriculum mapping, outcome-based, evaluations based on that student.
In artists, as you mentioned at the top, right? Let's make sure that we keep the eye and the perspective of the student through this conversation. Artists, there's a lot of techniques that come from the prior generation of AI and machine learning that we know, and that's also something that fuels, and it can be nicely connected. We're speaking about predictive modeling, all this likelihood to registered, how the financial aid component in the offers that he brings. I think that ecosystem, we're not saying it's destroyed. It just basically, it's nicely enhancing all this nuance that we have in this information. So through a lens of information retrieval and AI, what we know is that there's this chaos of unstructured data, and bringing the clarity and revolutionizing it for speed and efficiency. It's really the exciting thing. When we prepare for this, you had a very, very important and simple point. We must land the idea that admissions is a rubric. And the beautiful thing about that is that if we accept the idea that it's a rubric, we can come to generalizing many things look like an admission. So let's start with this idea that admissions looks like, walks like, and smells like a rubric. Ardis, can you say more about that?
If you look at admissions and you were to simplify everything down and say, what does it take for this student to admit to come to the school, you have a certain criteria, a level of criteria, or we call it rubrics, or you're evaluating them based on a certain level of criteria. It might be 5 criteria, it might be 10 criteria, and each one of those criteria is essentially a check mark that can be evaluated by one person. It can be a global criteria, meaning that, hey, the student is in state or out of state, right? And that's global to that student. There is no opinion about it. And then there is criteria that are opinion-based, meaning that the individual reader or the faculty member or whatever, there might be 2, 3 other people that are evaluating a transcript, evaluating an essay, and they can say, okay, this meets this criteria for leadership, and I think he gets a 5 in leadership, he gets a 10 in leadership. So different people have different ideas there. So the rubric is essentially the checklist of what are we evaluating this student on? We're evaluating him on grades, or we're evaluating him on academics, we're evaluating him in leadership, or we're evaluating him in state, out of state. So anything can be transformed into a criteria. Either that criteria is a yes or no, it's a numeric value, or it's a categorical value. It falls under this, this, or this. And then once you have that criteria or that rubric, right? So it's like essentially a rubric is a how to evaluate this person. That rubric is then put into software, and that's how the digital application review process, like Element 451 and our decisioning module, that's how we do it, where everything is a criteria, and then you can automate things and kind of assign automatically based on that criteria in here as well.
AKA, a rubric means that it has a measurable outcome, and then one of the great places for AI is to live through this idea of measurable outcomes. So to that end, a transcript, it's measurable, and it's basically a rubric that allows to understand verification of credits, discrepancies, course evaluation, we've spoken about that, course mapping and curriculum mapping, this idea that an incoming students and the coursework that they bring in, all how it's nested against the requirements, degrees, requirements in the catalog that need to do it. And artists, one of the special ones that it brings back so many memories, this idea of merit-based evaluations, right? A rubric of, if you have XYZ, I can match you with WX in dollars and cents, right? Highly, highly important, basically, objectivity of how the dollars and cents are being invested in the lives of the students. And this is where you can start bringing academic performance, curricular involvement, or other demonstrated competencies to basically put this important program that an institution has on an AI kind of strategy and ecosystem. Anything else to add here on the rubric idea, Ardis, from your side?
No, so this rubric idea is really important because now we can start mapping out, what an AI evaluation system or what we call it an AI reader or an AI decision agent can do on top of this criteria and how it's getting evaluated. So when we start thinking about this, it's admissions. Again, admissions is fundamentally a rubric. It's making the perfect candidate or fit into, what is the criteria to come to this school, right? So as we go through this, that really matches now the process of how do we build agents, and that's what we're working, and that's what we have here at Element 451, is that the platform of a human evaluating that student. They can press buttons, and they can put drop downs, and they can put notes in there, and they can evaluate it in a digital environment. But now imagine having, based on that criteria and that rubric, having an AI do exactly the same thing, ingesting the rubric ingesting all of the documents, doing data extraction from those documents, and going through that rubric and saying, okay, based on this, I'm going to give him a 2 for this criteria. I'm going to give him a 1 for this criteria. I'm going to give him a pass or fail for this one. And I'm going to decide my reasoning for doing that as well. Now, can you imagine that? Like, this is like hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of writing that somebody has to do to convince you of why they picked that number. Now AI can do that really, really nicely through this AI agents, and that's exactly what our AI reader solution or AI admissions agent is doing at Element, is that it's going through that whole process and evaluating those students just like a human would. And that AI decision is right next to, or recommendation is right next to that human recommendation as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I really love from our product team is how in this deployment of AI to support decisions, aka the Element approach to an AI-powered admission, it's through a tagline, your first read is your second read. And it's a really powerful tagline, or it's a really powerful aspiration that as you start your day, you basically have been given so many things and put in a place of enhancement. So number one, you can have a more efficient, a fair, consistency, and scalable process. In Ardis, admissions, yay nays in institutions are such an important aspect of what we do, what our students benefit from. Sometimes they're not. And being mindful of how AI can bring it to the next level is kind of part of what this conversation is all about. In the next weeks at Element, we like to bring you into a series of conversations. Visit our website for webinars around how AI and admissions commingle, how our product is actually being an AI-first approach to admissions and bringing all this mindset, but also how leaders like Ardis and I start thinking about how is this new admissions offer preparing towards these goals. And there's a lot to be still written and a lot to be done, but there's a really important message from you and I, Ardis, to all of you listeners, that AI-powered admissions is not about replacing the human judgment. It's literally about empowering it to operationalize at its best. And this is the opportunity that we have today. Ardis, you want to sign us off?
Hey, I think the opportunity is to remove human bias. That's my North Star here. It's how do we have fair evaluations and faster and better for those students. So that's, again, AI-powered admissions. It is about replacing our failed human judgment, but we can check on them and make sure that they're doing the right thing. And we can spend time on those students, giving them that pep talk of why they should be at that school and the pitch rather than the AI doing that. So yes, everybody, thank you for kind of indulging with us as we go through this. There's a lot more technologies and capabilities that are getting built as part of these systems, including Element 451, which I'm really, really proud. And hopefully over the next few weeks, you get to see some of that innovation coming in the market as we try to kind of transform higher education admissions and AI decisioning and reading. So till next time.
Bye, everybody.
Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.